Hello and welcome to Indus News Live with me, Osman Lone. We begin this hour with our top story, and that's Iran's supreme leader vowing harsh retaliation for a US airstrike in Baghdad that killed its top military commander, Qasem Soleimani. President Hassan Rouhani said Iran and other free nations of the region will take revenge for this gruesome crime from criminal America. Foreign Minister Javad Zarif condemned the killing as an act of state terrorism. The killing of the top commander marked a dangerous escalation in the ongoing standoff between Washington and Tehran, which careened from one crisis to another since the US withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal in 2018. This latest escalation comes after protesters stormed the US embassy in Baghdad following a US attack on a pro-Iranian militia in Iraq and Syria. 8 other people, including Iraqi militia commander Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, were also killed in the airstrike in Baghdad. The Pentagon said the attack was ordered by President Donald Trump. Meanwhile, thousands of people took to the streets in Tehran to denounce the killing of Major General Soleimani. Sensing the gravity of the situation, the United States has asked its citizens to leave Iraq immediately. Iran has now appointed Esmail Qaani as Soleimani's successor. Well, for more on this story, we're joined by Mustafa Koshelzem, a political analyst live from Tehran. Mustafa, thank you for joining us here on Indus News. So please tell me, how serious is this new development and how will this impact the region and the world?
Hello, and thanks for having me. Well, this has been definitely an act of war, a declaration of war on Iran. Let's remember that Iran and the United States, despite the fact that the U.S. has been waging an economic war on Iran for quite a long time, they were not, technically, they were not in military war. And Qasem Soleimani was, helping the Iraqis with a fight against ISIL that have not been uprooted completely in Iraq. And Qasem Soleimani was assassinated by the U.S. aircraft at a civilian infrastructure that's Basad International Airport. So this is also an act of terrorism, and it has pushed us into a new chapter, not just Iran and the U.S. and their relations, but also the whole region as well as the world. Because now, Iran has been adamant to opening war on the United States on friendly land like Iraq. No, wise army would go into war at home or on friendly land because of collateral damage. And Iran has remained adamant to any such possibility. But this doesn't mean that Iraqis would not wage attacks on all U.S. bases across Iraq, because their top officials have also been assassinated. Abu Mahdi Mohandes, the deputy commander of the Iraqi Popular Forces, the Popular Forces of Iraq, have been named as part of the country's official armed forces since months ago. So this has been a violation of Iraq's sovereignty and insult to them. They will definitely take revenge for their own martyrs as well as for Qasem Soleimani, because they admired him and loved him a lot. But Iran's response would definitely come in other geographies, not just at the level of the region, but at a global scale, since 8 months ago, top commander of IRGC had warned that in case of the slightest mistake by the United States, Iran's response would not be contained to the region, but the whole world would witness Iran's reaction. So for the time being, we can say one thing. If the U.S. had any hope in efficiency of its sanctions on Iran to push Tehran to the negotiating table, it would not cross the line. Now that it has crossed the line and opened war on Iran, this means the chances for any kind of negotiation are gone, and we are preparing actually for a new chapter, that's military war.
Mustafa, I want to ask you, you say it's an act of terrorism. Iran's foreign minister says it's an act of state terrorism. I mean, can America, under international law, kill a civilian in another country from another country? Is that even allowed?
No, of course not. It's not allowed, especially because Qasem Soleimani was official military general and commander of an official body, a state army, that's Iranian army, the IRGC is part of the armed forces. Also, especially considering that the United Nations has never mentioned, the U.S. has labeled Iran's IRGC as a terrorist group, but this has been rejected by the UN and many other world countries, even the U.S. allies. Now, the U.S. Doesn't need to regard and respect international rules and regulations. They have already proved that. They proved it when they attacked Iraq's official armed forces last week and killed nearly 28 Iraqi Popular Mobilization Forces. And also they repeated the same early on Friday. They show that they don't feel any respect. As a matter of fact, there is a long record of statements, official statements and documents from U.S. Army generals who have always been saying that they are wary of any kind of military conflict with Iran. That's why I believe that the Pentagon has not been, it has been reluctant probably to do so, and it's been pushed to do so by the White House since Donald Trump is facing catastrophic defeat on the political scene at home after his impeachment and after his failure in forcing Tehran to the negotiating table or scoring something for himself and earning a merit through scoring a deal with North Korea. Now he needs something to derail the public attention from his failures at home. But this
Mustafa,
time,
just quickly, I want to ask you, Mustafa, you're
game.
sitting there in Iran, you're there, you've seen the crowds of people there, you've heard Iran saying there's going to be a harsh retaliation, Mustafa. What kind of response do you think Iran's going to give for this action?
Well, definitely, first of all, there are two things that are definite. First, Iran would give a devastating response. The scene would be, the theater would be as wide as the world, not the region. And what I know is that sometimes Iranians give a fast response, a crushing one. Sometimes they keep the foes and enemies waiting in order to wear off their power and preparedness level in order to surprise them. What I know is that Tehran has vast options from its robust missile power to its naval forces, speedboats in the Persian Gulf. They could hit the United States interests all across the globe, as well as the United States allies in the region. They could block the supply of oil through the Strait of Hormuz, as well as Bab el-Mandeb or anywhere else they would like to. Also, Iran has strong allies all across the Middle East. They could also wreak havoc on the U.S. and its allies in the region. So far, many popular groups in Iraq have stressed that they would go for an attack on all U.S. bases in Iraq soon, independent from Iran. That's their own retaliation. Tehran's retaliations would come soon, and it would be tough.
Mustafa, thank you for your time. I wish we could speak for longer, but we run out of time now. Mustafa Koshezem, live in Tehran there, talking about our top story about the killing of General Soleimani. Now, in a related development, the assassination of Iranian Major General Qasem Soleimani has divided US Congress, drawing praise and criticism. The Democrats criticized the killing, while the Republicans were mostly united in their praise of President Donald Trump's decision. More in this report.
Senators Lindsey Graham, Tom Cotton, and Marco Rubio backed Trump, saying it sends a strong message to Iran. Senator Bernie Sanders called it a dangerous escalation which brings the Middle East closer to another disastrous war. Democrat presidential frontrunner Joe Biden said no American would mourn Soleimani's death, but warned of consequences for such a high-profile assassination. Senators Elizabeth Warren and Tom Udall called it a reckless move. Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton said it could worsen an already tense situation. Senator Chris Murphy claimed the U.S. president did not have the legal authority to order the strike without congressional approval.
Meanwhile, around the world, governments have expressed concern and alarm over the killing of General Qasem Soleimani. Iraq's Prime Minister Adel Abdul Mahdi condemned the attack, calling it an act of aggression on the country that could lead to war. Iran's major allies, Hezbollah and the Syrian government, call the raid treacherous American aggression. Russia's foreign ministry said the killing of Soleimani will escalate tensions in the Middle East, and China has expressed concerns and called on Iran and the US to show restraint. Moving on to North Korea now, which says any attempt to undermine its survival will be met with an immediate and powerful strike. State media reports North Korea is now engaging in an all-out effort to build up its national defense capability. Earlier, U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper called on Kim to exercise restraint. He said the best path forward is still seeing a political agreement on denuclearizing North Korea. Esper said the resumption of large-scale military exercises with South Korea remains an option. South Korea's main opposition, the Liberty Korea Party, said its senior officials will visit the US next week to discuss tensions. US President Donald Trump has warned Turkey against any foreign interference in Libya. Now, this comes after the Turkish parliament approved the deployment of troops to support Tripoli's government of national accord. In a phone call with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Trump said interference in Libya will complicate the situation. In a joint statement, Greece and Cyprus condemned Ankara's decision, saying it poses a serious threat to stability in the region. The Arab League also rejected Turkey's growing involvement in Libya. Egypt called the decision a blatant violation of international law and UN Security Council resolutions. Earlier, Turkey's parliament approved a bill to send troops to Libya in support of the UN-recognized government. The UN Security Council will meet behind closed doors today to discuss the violence in Syria's Idlib. The meeting comes at the request of Britain and France, supported by the US. US President Donald Trump and Turkey's Recep Tayyip Erdogan agreed on the need for de-escalation. On Thursday, UNICEF Executive Director Henrietta Fore called for a stop to the hostilities in northwest Syria. Diplomats say they hope the session will discuss the reauthorization of cross-border UN aid. The United States has sanctioned Cuba's Armed Forces Minister Leopoldo Frias. Sintra is a career military officer who joined Fidel Castro's rebel army in 1957. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo accused Sintra of human rights violations and cited his support of Venezuela's president. Pompeo said Sintra's ministry is responsible for Cuba propping up Nicolas Maduro's regime in Venezuela. Washington's top diplomat said the ministry was guilty of torturing Cubans. The sanctions also prevent Sintra's children from entering the United States. 18 people have been killed after a Sudanese military plane crashed in West Darfur state. The aircraft crashed 5 minutes after takeoff from an airport in the state capital of En Janina. Army spokesman Ahmed Al-Hassan said the victims included 7 crew members, 3 judges and 8 civilians, and he said 4 children were also among those killed. An investigation is underway to determine the cause of the crash. The plane was in El Janina to deliver aid to the area. El Janina has seen severe tribal violence in recent weeks, which has claimed at least 48 lives. Well, we'll be back with more news from around the world right after this short break, so do stay with us. Hello again, it's good to have you back. Now in Indonesia, the death toll from flooding has risen to 43 after torrential rains caused landslides in the capital, Jakarta. Disaster management officials warned the death toll may rise. Officials said 30,000 people have been forced from their homes by rivers flooding at least 90 neighborhoods. The city's main airport has suspended operations. The authorities have decided to attempt cloud seeding in a bid to prevent further rainfall. Australians are bracing themselves for more bushfires, forcing widespread evacuations. The Navy is picking up thousands of people stranded on the country's east coast. The Bureau of Meteorology has warned of the danger becoming extreme, with strong winds and temperatures hitting 40 degrees Celsius. At the peak of the summer holiday period, tens of thousands of tourists are leaving the country. Victoria has declared a state of disaster for the first time in its history, while a state of emergency has been announced in New South Wales. At least 20 people have died so far and 28 remain missing. In Pakistan, the birthday celebrations for the 10th Sikh Guru Gobind Singh have begun at Gurdwara Katorpar in Narowal. Around 2,000 local Sikhs and Indian pilgrims will attend the celebrations. Additional Secretary Shrines Tariq Wazir said all arrangements, including free food, have been completed. The central ceremony will be held on January 5th at the Gurdwara in Kartarpur. Punjab Minister for Awqaf Sayyid Saeed Ul Hassan will be the chief guest. Gurdwara Darbar Sahib will remain closed for regular tourists for 3 days. The United States says it will expand a program that returns non-Mexican migrants and asylum seekers to their country. Washington has already sent more than 56,000 people to Mexico under the Migrant Protection Protocols program. The majority of the people are Central Americans applying for U.S. asylum. In a statement, the Department of Homeland Security said the program has been an extremely effective tool. But immigration advocates say the program exposes migrants to violence in Mexico and restricts their ability to seek protection in the U.S. President Donald Trump has made a crackdown on immigration a major focus in his office and his current re-election bid. The United Nations Security Council has appointed 5 non-permanent members for the next 2-year term. Estonia, Niger, St. Vincent, Tunisia and Vietnam have now taken up their roles in the Council. Of the 5 newly elected members, Estonia and St. Vincent have never served on the Security Council. Kuwait, Peru, Poland, Côte d'Ivoire and Equatorial Guinea have just left. The 15-member council has 5 permanent members: Britain, China, France, Russia and the US. And Security Council powers include setting up peacekeeping operations and international sanctions. Now, in business news, Greece, Israel and Cyprus have signed a pipeline transit deal to supply natural gas to Europe. The supply accounts for 10% of the EU's total annual gas needs. The project has a budget of over $6.5 billion and will stretch over 2,000 kilometers. The East Mediterranean pipeline will run from Israel's Levantine Basin offshore gas reserves to Cyprus, Crete and the Greek mainland. Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis said the agreement sealed the resolve for a strategic connection between the two countries. Airbus has overtaken rival Boeing to become the world's biggest plane maker. Boeing 737 MAX jets have grounded since March last year, following 2 crashes within 5 months. The grounding has already cost the company more than $9 billion. Airbus delivered a record 863 aircraft in 2019, while Boeing only managed 345. The 737 MAX is critical to Boeing's operations, representing nearly 60% of all of its sales. Boeing faces several compensation claims from victims' families and airlines hit by the grounding of the plane. Stock markets across Europe have slumped after a US airstrike killing a top Iranian commander in Iraq. Investors have offloaded major positions after weighing up the impact of the crisis. Frankfurt's DAX is trading nearly 1% lower. The CAC 40 in Paris and London's FTSE 100 have lost a fraction amid the flaring tensions. In Asia, Tokyo's Nikkei 225 led the losses, closing 0.75% lower. Hong Kong's Hang Seng lost a fraction, with shares in HSBC declining 0.75%. Well, it's 16 degrees here in Lahore, but let's take a look at the weather around the world. Well, that's the news, but we'll be back at the top of the hour with the headlines. And for the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Bye-bye.